The Lemonade War by Jacqueline Davis. Chapter 1. Slump. Slump. A drop in the activity of a business or the economy. Evan lay on his back in the dark, throwing the baseball in a straight line and catching it in his bare hands. Thwop, thwop. The ball made a satisfying sound as it slapped his palm. His legs flopped in a V, his arms stretched up to the ceiling, and the thought that if he missed, he'd probably break his nose made the game just interesting enough to keep going. On the floor above, he heard footsteps, his mother's, and then a long, loud, scraping, groaning sound. He stopped throwing the ball to listen. His mother was dragging something heavy across the kitchen floor, probably the broken air conditioner. A week ago, right at the beginning of the heat wave, the air conditioner in his mother's attic office had broken. The man from Sears had installed a brand new one, but left the old one sitting right in the middle of the kitchen floor. The Treskys had been walking around it all week. Scrape. Evan stood up. His mom was strong, but this was a two-person job. Hopefully, she wouldn't ask him why he was hiding in the dark basement. And hopefully, Jessie wouldn't be in the kitchen at all. He'd been avoiding her for 2 days now, and it was getting harder by the minute. The house just wasn't that big. Evan had his hand on the railing when the scraping noise stopped. He heard footsteps fading to silence. She'd given up. Probably the heat, he thought. It was the kind of weather, giving up kind of weather. He went back to lying on the floor, thwop, thwop. Then he heard the basement door open. Psh. Evan caught the ball and froze. Evan, Jessie's voice sounded echoey in the darkness. Evan, you down there? Evan held his breath. He lay completely still. The only thing that moved was the pins and needles prickling in his fingers. He heard the door start to close, long breath out, but then it stopped and opened again. Footsteps on the carpeted stairs, a black outline of Jessie standing on the bottom step with daylight squirting all around her. Evan didn't move a muscle. Evan, is that you? Jessie took one short step into the basement. Is that? She inched her way toward him, then kicked him with her bare foot. Hey, watch it, would you? Said Evan, swatting her leg. He suddenly felt stupid lying there in the dark. I thought you were a sleeping bag, she said. I couldn't see. What are you doing down here? How come the lights are off? It's too hot with the lights on, he said. He talked in a flat voice, trying to sound like the most boring person on the whole planet. If he kept it up, Jessie might just leave him alone. Mom's back in her office, said Jessie, lying down on the couch. Working, she groaned as she said the word. Evan didn't say anything. He went back to throwing the ball. Straight up, straight down. Maybe silence would get Jessie to leave. He was starting to feel words piling up inside him, crowding his lungs, forcing out all the air. It was like having a chest full of bats, beating their wings, fighting to get out. She tried to move the air conditioner, but it's too heavy, said Jessie. Evan tightened up his lips. Go away, he thought. Go away before I say something mean. It's going to be a hot all week, Jessie continued. In the 90s, all the way up till Labor Day. Thwop, thwop. So what do you want to do? Jessie asked. Scream, thought Evan. Jessie never got it when you were giving her the big freeze. She just went right on acting as if everything were great. It made her really hard to tell her to bug off without telling her to bug off. Whenever Evan did that, he felt bad. So what do you want to do? Jessie asked again, nudging him with her foot. It was a direct question. Evan had to answer it or explain why he wouldn't. And he couldn't get into that. It was too complicated, too hurtful. Huh? So what do you want to do? She asked for the third time. Doing it, said Evan. Nah, come on, for real. For real, he said. We could ride our bikes to 7-Eleven, she said. No money, he said. You just got $10 from Grandma for your birthday. Spent it, said Evan. On what? Stuff, Evan said. Jessie's voice dribbled down to nothing. Evan stopped throwing the ball and looked at her. What? Jessie pulled her legs tight to her chest. Nothing, she said. Right, said Evan. He knew that Jessie had money. Jessie always had money squirreled away in her lockbox. But that didn't mean she was going to share it. Evan went back to throwing the baseball. He felt a tiny flame of anger shoot up and lick his face. Thwop, thwop. We could build a fort in the woods, said Jessie. Too hot. We could play Stradigo. Okay. Thwop, thwop. We could build a fort in the woods, said Jesse. Too hot. We could play Stratago. Too boring. We could build a track and raise marbles. Too stupid. A thin spiderweb of sweat draped itself over his forehead, spreading into his hair. With every throw, he told himself, it's not her fault. But he could feel his anger growing. He started popping his elbow out to put a little more juice on the ball. It was flying a good 4 feet into the air every time. Straight up, straight down. Pop, thwop, pop, thwop. The bats in his chest were going nuts. What is the matter with you? Asked Jesse. You've been so weird the last couple of days. Aw man, here they come. I just don't want to play a dumb game like Stratago, he said. You like Stratago. I only picked that because it's your favorite game. I was being nice in case you hadn't noticed. Look, there are only 6 days left of summer, and I'm not going to waste them playing a dumb game. Evan felt his heartbeat speed up. Part of him wanted to stuff a sock in his mouth, and part of him wanted to deck his sister. It's a stupid game, and it's for babies, and I don't want to play a stupid baby game. Pop, thwop, pop, thwop. Why are you being so mean? Evan knew he was being mean, and he hated being mean, especially to her. But he couldn't help it. He was so angry and so humiliated and so full of bats, there was nothing else he could be except alone, and she's taken even that away from him. You're the genius, he said. You figure it out. Good. That would shut her up for once. Evan watched the ball fly in the air. Is this because of the letter? Jesse asked. Crack. Evan had taken his eyes off the ball for 1 second, just for 1 second, and the ball came crashing down on his nose. Crud, oh crud. He curled over onto his side, grabbing his nose with both hands. There was a blinding, booming pain right behind his eyes that was quickly spreading to the outer edges of his skull. Do you want some ice? He heard Jesse ask in a calm voice. What do you think? He shouted. Yeah? She stood up. No, I don't want any stupid ice. The pain was starting to go away like a humongous wave that crashes with a lot of noise and spray, but then slowly fizzles away into nothing. Evan rolled to a sitting position and took his hands away from his nose. With his thumb and index finger, he started to pinch the bridge. Was it still in a straight line? Jessie peered at his face in the dim light. You're not bleeding, she said. Yeah, well, it hurts, he said a lot. It's not broken, she said. You don't know that, he said. You don't know everything, you know. You think you do, but you don't. It's not even swollen. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Evan held his nose with one hand and hit his sister's knee with the other. Then he picked up the baseball and struggled to his feet. Leave me alone. I came down here to get away from you, and you just had to follow. You ruined everything. You ruined my summer, and now you're going to ruin school. I hate you. When he got to the bottom of the steps, he threw the baseball down in disgust. Thud.
The Lemonade War by Jacqueline Davis, Chapter 2, The Breakup. Breakup. The solution of a unit or organization or a group of organization. The Justice Department sometimes forces the breakup of large corporations into several smaller companies. Jessie didn't get it. She just didn't get it. What was Evan's problem? He'd been acting like a weirdo for 2 days now. And it was 2 days ago that the letter had arrived. But why would he get so upset about a letter? This is a puzzle, Jessie told herself, and I'm good at puzzles. But it was a puzzle about feelings, and Jessie knew that feelings were her weakest subject. Jessie sat in the cool darkness of the basement and thought back to Monday, the day the letter had come. Everything had been normal. She and Evan were putting together a lemonade stand in the driveway when the mailman walked up and handed Jessie a bundle of letters. Evan never bothered to look at the mail, but Jessie was always entering contests and accepting to win, so she flipped through the letters right away. Boring, 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 said Jessie, as each letter flashed by. Hey, something from school, addressed to Mom. She held up a plain white envelope. What do you think it is? Dunno, said Evan. He said, yeah. This is much harder than I thought. And it's just reading a book.
It's what, a third grade level book?
Whoa, take it easy there, Thomas, because you're next. Yeah.
You gonna do murder me?
Yes.
Oh. Gotta take me out to dinner first.
She doesn't care. He was in the garage uncovering the small wooden table they usually used for a stand. It was buried under 2 snow tubes, 2 boogie boards, and a garden hose. Jessie watched while Evan gave a mighty pull and lifted the table over his head. Wow, he's gotten so big, thought Jessie, remembering what Mom had said about Evan's growth spurt. Sometimes Jessie felt like even Evan was growing twice as fast as she was. Growing up, growing away, it looks like. It looks important, said Jessie. It looked like bad news, is what she said through her head. Was there a problem? A complaint? A mix-up? All this nervousness she had been feeling about skipping the 4th grade suddenly blurred up inside her. This table really dirty, said Evan. Do you think we can just cover it with lots of cups and pitchers and no one would notice? Jessie looked at the table, was streaked with black. No, Evan groaned. I'd clean it, Jessie said. Evan had only agreed the lemonade stand because it was the one thing her favorite thing to do. The least she could do for him was clean the gunk off the table. Maybe, she said, holding up an envelope again. They're postponing school. Postponing school? Maybe the first day isn't going to be Tuesday, you think? That got Evan's attention. Let's ask Mom to open it, he said. Up in the humming cool of her office, Miss Tresky read the letter through once. Well, she said, this is a curveball. She looked right at Evan. Jessie thought her face looked worried. Evan, you and Jessie are going to be in the same class this year. You both have Miss Overton. Jessie felt relief flood through her entire body. The same class! If she could have wished for one thing in the whole world, that would be if her and Evan were in the same class. She would be with Evan, and Evan would make everything easier. He would introduce her to all the 4th graders. He shows them all about if he would show them all that she's okay. Not some punny 2nd grader who didn't really belong. But Evan didn't look happy. He looked angry. Why? He said in almost a shouting voice. Miss Tresky scanned the letter. Well, the classes were small to start with, and now some of the 4th graders they thought would be attending aren't because they're moving or switching private schools. So they need to combine the 2 classes to make one bigger class. This is so unfair, said Evan. I wanted Mrs. Scobie, and I don't want... He looked at Jessie. That's so unfair. Jessie was surprised. This is great news. Why didn't Evan see that? They always had fun together at home. Now they can have fun at school, too. It'll be fun, she said to Evan. It will not be fun, said Evan. School isn't fun. And this stomped down the stairs and locked himself in his room for the rest of the afternoon. They never finished the lemonade stand, and here it was, 2 days later, and Evan was still locked up. Even though he wasn't in the room, he wouldn't talk to her or he wouldn't even play with her. So Jessie went up to her room and did what she always did when she was upset or angry or sad or confused. She started reading Charlotte's Web. She had read the book 100 times. She was at the good part, the happy part. Wilbur had just named some pig, and he was getting all kinds of attention from the Zickermans the whole town. But Jessie couldn't settle into the happy feelings. The one that usually came from Charlotte. I dare say my trick will work, and Wilbur's life can be saved. Instead, she kept noticing unhappy feelings, tap, tap, tapping on her shoulder, and it was the unhappy feeling and that came from knowing Charlotte was going to die on page 101. It was Evan. She couldn't stop thinking about what he said. Jessie could only remember the one time that Evan had said, I hate you to her. Grandma had been over and Evan needed help with some math homework. He got frustrated, screwed up mouth looked like sometimes got... He had the frustrated, screwed up mouth look that he sometimes gets with math or spelling or writing reports. Mom called it his gonna blow look. But Grandma couldn't help him because it was all in Greek to her. So Jessie had shown him how to do each problem. Well, she just sort of jumped in and done the problems for him. That was helping, wasn't it? Grandma had called her a girl genius, but Evan had ripped his paper in half and ran upstairs shouting, I hate you, just before slamming his door. That was the last year. Jessie rested the book on her stomach and stared at the ceiling. People were confusing. She'd rather do hundreds of math problems than try to figure out someone else's mixed up feelings any day of the week. That's why she and Evan got along so well. He'd just tell her straight out, "I'm mad at you because you ate the last Rice Krispie treat," and then she would say, "Sorry, hey, I got some Starbursts in my room. You want them?" And then that would be it. Evan was straight shooter, not like the girls at school, the ones who had started the club. She rolled over on her side to get away from those thoughts. Across the room, against the opposite wall, she noticed there was a piece of the foam care her mom had bought her for Jessie. Across the room, against the opposite wall, she noticed there's three pieces of foam core her mom had bought her for Jessie's Labor Day project. Every year, the Rotary Club sponsored a competition for kids to see who would come up with the best display related to the holiday. This was the first year Jessie was old enough to participate, and she had been begging her mom to buy the foam core, gel pens, and the fluorescent paper and special stickers for her display. She was determined to win the prize money, $100, but she hadn't been able to come up with a single idea that seemed good enough. So here it was, just 5 days before the competition, and the foam core was completely blank. Jessie reached for her book, and she didn't think about the girls at school. She didn't think about the competition. She started reading again. Wilbert and Charlotte were at the fair, and Charlotte was beginning to show her age. Jessie read the words Wilbert said to his best friend. "I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte. Perhaps if I spin you a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better." Well, the second part didn't apply at all. But Jessie imagined herself saying that first line, "I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Evan." It sounded about right. At least it would show him that she cared. And Jessie knew that it was more important than someone who was feeling upset. She decided to go downstairs and give it a try. She would do just about anything to get Evan back the way he was before the letter. Jessie looked into the kitchen. In the backyard, no Evan. She was halfway down the steps to the basement when she heard a noise coming from the garage. She opened the door and felt the full heat of the day on her skin. It was like some giant had blown his hot, sticky breath on her. In the garage, she found Evan and Scott Spencer. Weird, she thought. Evan doesn't even like Scott Spencer. They'd been on and off again, friends from kindergarten. But ever since Scott had put Evan's bike helmet under the wheel of his Tetris minivan so that Mrs. Jessie would run over it when she backed up, her friendship had been definitely off. Jessie looked from Evan to Scott and back again. Now she had no idea what to say. "I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Evan." Didn't seem to make much sense when Evan was obviously having fun with his friend. She tried to think of something else to say. All she could come up with was, "What are you doing?" The boys are bent over a piece of cardboard. Evan was writing letters with a skinny red felt pen. The purple cooler was in the middle of the garage, and the two plastic chairs are stacked on top. On top of the chairs was a brown paper bag. "Nothing," said Evan, looking up. Jessie walked over to the boys and peered over Evan's shoulder. "She said you spelled lemonade wrong. It's an O, not an I." But she thought, "Oh good, a lemonade stand, my favorite thing to do." The boys didn't say anything. Jessie saw Evan's mouth tighten up. "You want to make a lemonade stand?" she said. "Already made," Evan said. "I could decorate the sign," she said. "I'm good at drawing butterflies and flowers and things." Scott snorted. "Huh? We don't want girl stuff like that on our sign. Do you want to use my lockbox to keep the money in? I got a tray of separate compartments for different coins." "Nope," Evan said, still working on the sign. "Well," she said, looking around, "I can clean the table for you." The wooden small table, still covered in black streaks, was pushed over against the bikes. "We're not even using it," said Evan. But we always use the table for the stand," said Jessie. Evan pushed his face in her direction. "We don't want it." Jessie took a couple of steps back inside. Her insides felt runny, like a fried egg that hasn't cooked enough. She knew that she shouldn't just go back in the house, but for some reason her legs wouldn't move. She stood still. Her bare feet rotted to the cool cement. Scott whispered something to Evan, and the two boys laughed, low and mean. Jessie swayed towards the door, but her feet stayed planted. She couldn't stand it that Evan wanted to be with Scott, who's a real jerk, more than her. "Hey," she said, I bet you need change. I got ton. You should Hey," she said, "I bet you need change. I got a ton. You could have all my change, as long as you pay it back at the end of the day." "Don't need it," said Evan. "Yeah, you do," insisted Jessie. You need change, especially in the beginning. You'll lose your sales if you don't make change." Evan capped the pen with a loud snap and stuck it in his pocket. "Scott's bankrolling us. His mom keeps a change jar, and so we've got plenty." The boys stood up. Evan held a sign for Scott to read, turning his back to Jessie. "Awesome," said Scott. Jessie knew that the sign was not awesome. The letters were too small and thin to read from a distance. Evan should have used a fat marker instead of a skinny felt tip pen. Everyone knew that. There weren't any pretty decorations to attract customers, and the word lemonade was spelled wrong. Why would Evan even take a little help from her? She just wanted help. Scott turned to her and said, "Are you really going to be in the 4th grade this year?" Jessie's back sniffed. "Yes," she said. "Wow, that's so freaky." "Is it not?" she said, sticking her chin out. It is too, said Scott. "I mean, you're 2nd grade and you're going to be in the 4th grade. That's just messed up." Jessie looked at Evan, but he was busy tapping his sign to cool it. "Lots of people skip grades," said Jessie. "It's not a big deal." It's completely weird," said Scott. "I mean, you missed everything for a whole year. You missed the whole unit of Antarctica. That was the best. And the field trip to the aquarium, and the thing we sent letters all over the country. Remember that, Evan? You got the letters from Alaska. That was so cool." Evan nodded, but he didn't look up. "It was not a big deal," Jessie said, her voice stretched tight like a rubber band. "It was like you missed a whole year of your life," Scott said. "It's like you're gonna die a whole year earlier than the rest of us because you never had a 3rd grade. Jessie felt cold and hot at the same time. Part of her wanted to yell, "It doesn't make any sense." But the other part of her felt so freakish, like Scott had just noticed that she had 3 legs. Evan stood up and tossed the paper bag to Scott. Then he grabbed the plastic chairs with one hand. "Come on, let's go." He reached down to grab one handle of the cooler. Scott grabbed the other, and together they lifted it and began walking outside the garage. "Hey, Evan," said Jessie, calling to their backs. "Can I come too?" "No," he said, without turning around. "Come on, please. I'll be a big help. I can do lots of—" "You're too young," he said sharply. "You're just a baby." The boys walked out. "You're just a baby." Jessie couldn't believe Evan had said that to her. After all that stuff they'd gone to together, and he was only 14 months older than she was, hardly even a year. She was about to yell back something really harsh, something stinging and full of bite, like, "Oh yeah?" when you heard Scott say to Evan, "Man, I can't believe you have to be in the same class as your little sister. If that happened to me, I'd move to South America." "Yeah, tell me about it," replied Evan, crossing the street. The words died in Jessie's lips. She watched Evan walk away and getting smaller and smaller. He was deserting her. He wasn't going to stand by her at school. He wasn't going to smooth the way for her. He was going to be on the other side with all of them, looking down at her, telling everyone she was too young to be part of the crowd, telling everyone she didn't belong. Fine for you, Evan Tresky," she said, as she marched in the house, her fist balled up on her sides. "I don't need you. I don't need you. I have fun. I don't need you to run a lemonade stand. I don't need you to make friends in the 4th grade." Halfway up the stairs, she stopped and shouted, "And I am not a baby."